Imagine you are a White House aide in 1965. The President of the United States invites you for a drive around his Texas ranch. You climb into a small blue convertible. Lyndon Johnson floors it toward the lake, and as the car picks up speed heading straight for the water, he starts screaming, "The brakes do not work. The brakes will not hold. We are going in." Then the car hits the water. You reach for the door handle, ready to swim for your life. And then the car keeps going, because it is an amphicar. And the president is laughing so hard he can barely steer. That is one of at least a dozen insane stories about the private cars that American presidents drove when nobody was watching. From FDR defying the Secret Service in a hand-controlled Ford to Ulysses Grant getting arrested for speeding in a horse and buggy, the cars presidents chose off the record reveal more about who they really were than any motorcade ever could. Forget the armored limos and the motorcades. The real stories are about the cars presidents bought with their own money, drove on their own time, and loved for their own reasons. And it starts with a man who weighed over 340 pounds and was terrified of horses. In February of 1909, William Howard Taft convinced Congress to give him $12,000, about $420,000 in today's money, to rip out the White House horse stables and build a garage. His personal favorite of the four cars he bought was a White Motor Company steam car Model M, built in Ohio, nearly silent, capable of 60 miles per hour. Taft had good reason to prefer cars over horses. When he was 9 years old, a runaway horse left him with a fractured skull. At over 340 pounds, horses were not exactly comfortable either. His driver figured out that you could blast the steam from the White steamer to scatter press photographers off the driveway. That might be the first time anyone used a car for presidential media management. Now, Taft was not the first president to have trouble with transportation speed limits. That honor goes back a lot further. In 1872, Ulysses S. Grant, the commanding general who won the Civil War, got pulled over for speeding in a horse and buggy. The officer was William West, a former enslaved man turned Civil War veteran turned Washington police officer. When West stopped him, Grant blamed the horses. He said, "Hang it, officer, these animals of mine are thoroughbreds and there is no holding them." West replied, "I am very sorry, Mr. President, to have to do it, for you are the chief of the nation and I am nothing but a policeman, but duty is duty, sir." Grant posted a $20 bond and never showed up to court. But the most moving car story in presidential history does not involve speed or pranks. It involves a man who could not walk and the machine that gave him his freedom back. Franklin Roosevelt contracted polio in 1921 at age 39 and lost the use of his legs, but Roosevelt discovered something. Behind the wheel of a car, his disability did not matter. He commissioned a mechanic named Fred Reliea in Poughkeepsie, New York, to build custom hand controls for a 1936 Ford Deluxe Phaeton in Washington blue. A lever replaced the gas and brake pedals. A trigger below the gear shift knob controlled the clutch. And on the steering column, because this was Roosevelt, a metal cigarette dispenser with a button to light them automatically. He bought the car in direct violation of a Secret Service order that the sitting president was not allowed to drive. He did not care. At his little White House retreat in Warm Springs, Georgia, Roosevelt regularly slipped away from his security detail to cruise back country roads with the top down. The mayor of Warm Springs remembered that he would just stop at the drugstore for a soda. He would sometimes slip off from the Secret Service men, and they would come find him. PBS captured it perfectly. Franklin loved to drive, and he drove fast. He designed his car himself with ingenious levers and pulleys so he could drive without his legs. For the first time since he was paralyzed, he felt free. That Ford Phaeton is on permanent display at the FDR Presidential Library at Hyde Park, New York. His other hand-controlled cars are at the Little White House in Warm Springs. And now from the most poignant presidential driver to the most dangerous one. Dwight Eisenhower's Gettysburg Farm was the only home he and Mamie ever owned after 37 moves and 38 years of Army marriage. And its most iconic vehicle was a baby blue electric golf cart. Picture this, May 8, 1959. Sir Winston Churchill, 84 years old, cigar clenched in his teeth, wearing a cowboy hat, riding shotgun while Eisenhower drives and the cart sags to one side under Churchill's weight as they whip over gravel roads. That is a real scene described by an AP reporter who watched it happen. Khrushchev, de Gaulle, Billy Graham, Bob Hope, and Arnold Palmer all got the same tour. But here's the story about Eisenhower that changed America forever. In 1919, a 28-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower joined an Army convoy driving from Washington to San Francisco. 3,200 miles. It took 62 days. Bridges collapsed under the trucks. Vehicles got stuck in mud for hours. Decades later, as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, he saw the German Autobahn, and something clicked. He wrote, "The old convoy had started me thinking about good two-lane highways, but Germany had made me see the wisdom of broader ribbons across the land." In 1956, he signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, authorizing $27 billion to build 47,000 miles of interstate highway. Every time you merge onto a freeway in America, that road exists because a young officer spent 2 miserable months trying to cross the country. Now, if Eisenhower gave America its highways, Lyndon Baines Johnson gave America its best presidential driving stories. And by best, I mean absolutely terrifying. LBJ owned a Lagoon Blue Amphicar 770, one of fewer than 4,000 ever made. It could drive on land and float on water. Johnson's favorite trick was to load first-time guests into the little convertible at his Stonewall, Texas ranch, floor it toward the lake, and start screaming, "The brakes do not work. The brakes will not hold. We are going in. We are going under." His special assistant Joseph Califano described it in his memoir. The car rolled toward the water, the president screamed about the brakes, and the car splashed into the lake. Califano reached for the door handle, ready to bail. Then the car leveled off and he realized it was an Amphicar. Johnson spent the rest of the evening mocking him. "Did you see what Joe did? He did not give a damn about his president. He just wanted to save his own skin." He pulled the same stunt on his Health and Education Secretary and on Eunice Kennedy Shriver. He eventually got a Secret Service agent in on the act to help set up the bit. But the Amphicar prank was the fun part. The Lincoln Continental stories are something else entirely. Johnson owned a 1964 Lincoln Continental convertible with suicide doors and a 430 cubic inch V8. He drove it around his ranch at 90 miles per hour while drinking scotch. Califano described the system. Johnson would slow down and hold his cup out the window. A Secret Service agent would sprint to the car, grab it, run back to the trailing wagon to refill it with ice, Cutty Sark, and soda, then run the full cup back to the president's outstretched hand. All while the motorcade kept rolling. The most harrowing account came from Baltimore Sun reporter Ernest Ferguson. During a massive thunderstorm in 1960, Johnson carried his scotch out of a judge's house, drove into total darkness on narrow ranch roads with one hand on the wheel and his drink in the other. The windshield wipers had no effect. Ferguson's job from the passenger seat was to simultaneously feed LBJ chocolates from a Whitman sampler and hand him his scotch. They nearly drove into the flooded Pedernales River. 11 people died in that storm. That Amphicar is still on display at the LBJ Ranch in Stonewall, Texas, along with his Lincoln Continental and a 1934 Ford that had a rifle rack and a wet bar with running water behind the front seat. Speaking of presidential road trips, 5 months after leaving the White House in 1953, Harry Truman packed a suitcase, put his wife Bess in the passenger seat of their Chrysler New Yorker, and drove 2,500 miles to the East Coast and back. No Secret Service, no staff, no bodyguards. Former presidents received no security detail at the time, and they stayed at $5 motels and ate at roadside diners. On July 5th, a Pennsylvania state trooper pulled over a black Chrysler with Missouri plates for driving too slowly in the left lane on the turnpike. The driver was the former president of the United States. Truman was the last president who could drive freely on American roads. The men who followed him would not be so lucky. Ronald Reagan's most beloved vehicle was a 1962 Willys Jeep CJ6, a Christmas present from Nancy. Originally foam green, it was repainted red with white pinstripes by the California National Guard before they moved to Rancho del Cielo. The horses chewed the seats apart. It had 4 floor shifters that baffled every Secret Service agent who tried to drive it. The Jeep became famous on Thanksgiving Day 1981 when Barbara Walters visited for an ABC special. She looked at it and said, "I do not want to hurt your feelings, but this is the scroungiest Jeep I have ever seen." Reagan loved it. That scroungy red Jeep became a symbol of his rancher image. Nancy later gave him a 1983 Jeep Scrambler with Gipper license plates. After leaving office, Reagan drove Mikhail Gorbachev around the ranch in it. When Gorbachev arrived and saw the modest ranch house, he asked, "Where is the palace?" Reagan once said of that ranch, If not heaven itself, it probably has the same zip code. The modern presidents all have their stories too. George W. Bush turned his Ford F-150 into a diplomatic weapon at his Crawford, Texas ranch. The press called it pickup diplomacy. He drove Vladimir Putin around the property in 2001. Putin had hoped to ride horses, but Bush had none. He called himself a windshield rancher. Tony Blair, Angela Merkel, and several other world leaders all got the truck tour. After leaving office, his 2009 F-150 King Ranch sold at Barrett-Jackson for $300,000. Bush had signed the dashboard, and when the signature was accidentally washed off, he signed it again, making it the only known vehicle signed twice by a president. Bill Clinton's car tells you everything about his generation. A 1967 Ford Mustang convertible in ice blue. 6-cylinder, automatic, 120 horsepower, a plain Jane with no performance options. His stepfather bought it, and Bill eventually took it over. At a Mustang Club event in 1994, he was reunited with the car and beamed, "Nobody lets me drive anymore." Barack Obama leased a 2005 Chrysler 300C with the Hemi V8 as an Illinois state senator, then traded it for a Ford Escape hybrid when a Hemi became politically inconvenient for a presidential candidate. He told CNBC, "I miss nothing more than just driving right along Lakeshore Drive, but I cannot do it." Donald Trump has the most extensive car collection of any president. Rolls-Royces, a Mercedes SLR McLaren, a Ferrari, even a Tesla Roadster. But the crown jewel was a 1997 Lamborghini Diablo VT Roadster in Blue Le Mans, a color Lamborghini did not even offer that year. He had the only one. It sold at Barrett-Jackson in January 2024 for $1.1 million. The crowd rose to their feet during bidding. In 2025, Trump said, "I love to drive cars. One of the best things in my life is driving, but I am not allowed to drive." And then there is Joe Biden. His 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray in Goodwood Green was a wedding gift from his father, who managed a Chevrolet dealership. 327 V8 4-speed manual. Biden claims 152 miles per hour. On Jay Leno's Garage in 2016, he did a burnout on camera and told Leno, "You realize this is only the third time I have gotten to drive this in 7 years," he said. "I love this car. Nothing but incredible memories. Every time I get in, I think of my dad and Beau." There is no law that says a president cannot drive. It is a Secret Service protocol that became absolute after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. LBJ was the last president to drive on public roads. Every president since has been confined to private property for life. From FDR's hand-controlled Ford that gave a paralyzed man his freedom, to Biden's Goodwood Green Corvette that reminds him of his father and his son, the cars presidents chose when nobody was watching reveal more about who they really were than any motorcade ever could. If you made it this far, you care about the stories behind the machines. Subscribe, because we are going deeper into the cars that shaped American history.